Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Bladtcast, a very special standalone Mando cast. As always, I am Christian Blatt, joined for the moment by Happy Go Jackie, the happiest, goiest, jackiest around, Frank Moran. Frank, thank you for being here on the show.
Christian, I am honored to be able to do two of these back to back subsequent nights with you. It's an honor.
It's amazing, and due to the way that the time space continuum works, our audio audience is going to hear our Picard wrap up after this one, because the Picard wrap up is going to be overstuffed. It'll be like an Oreo triple stuffed. It'll be filled with a lot of different conversation. But tonight, you and I are going to be speaking about The Mandalorian season 3. And an old friend from the AfterBuzz days pops in. Ivan Soto says, Frank from AfterBuzz, I've missed you. Haven't we all? I saw Frank yesterday, and I've missed him as well.
Ivan Soto, the feeling is more than mutual.
I am glad that Ivan found when we were doing the show, because he showed up in multiple chats, and he's like, when are you doing a Mandalorian show? I'm like, we're doing it after. I wasn't going to do this week to week. I think the interesting thing about season 3 of The Mandalorian is the sharp decline from season 2. Season 2 ended, one of the most amazing endings for season finales of a show. Luke Skywalker shows up, and it's just like something that I don't think I expected that we were going to. I mean, as that episode went along, you started to suspect, well, maybe, and you saw the X-Wing and all that. But I mean, it was like, I think that the episodes of the episodes of Book of Boba Fett with Mando in it might have been better than this entire season. There's points, there's things I like, there's characters I like. We'll talk about all of it. But in terms of like actual, like, wow, that was great. It's a sharp decline for me personally from both of the first two seasons. I loved both of the first two seasons. The first 16 episodes of the series, because we only deserve 8 episodes of The Mandalorian, and sometimes they're 37 minutes, and if you're lucky, they're 43. Where are you at as we look back on season 3 of The Mandalorian compared to where you were at the end of the first 2 seasons that were previous to this?
I mean, certainly I felt like 1 and 2 were just on a really nice upward trajectory for me. And so at the end of season 2, I mean, seeing Luke Skywalker, it was great.
Yeah.
The effects work aside, to be able to recreate a young Mark Hamill, not always perfect, but I was still willing to go along for the ride on that.
No, but it's just amazingly well done. It was not perfect, but it was like creepy, actually. It made me, really worry about the future of entertainment, that you can create people out of thin air,
Now, how did you feel about Book of Boba Fett being taken over for pretty much like 2 episodes by Mando's storyline? Would you rather have had that take place in the Mandalorian series proper, or did you not mind having that?
Yeah, but Book of Boba Fett was such a slog. I appreciated the detour. Yeah. I did not expect that, the cool Mandalorian, the bounty hunter, the biggest badass in the Star Wars universe, would get his own series, and you'd go like, wow, he's really boring. Like, I didn't expect that at all. Especially when, the setup for Book of Boba Fett. You want to talk about the end of Mando season 2. He kills Bib Fortuna, who's had it coming since 1983. So I think they needed to tie up a little. They needed to address some Mandalorian stuff to be able to have him interact with Boba Fett. And I think that that team up was great. Sort of the end of that season of Boba Fett. But for the sake of this show, him deciding to not train with Luke and getting to see Ahsoka, that all should have happened in a season of The Mandalorian, not in random. It's like, for people who read comic books, it was almost like you'd get those fill-in issues. You're like, well, what is this? It's a completely different creative team. It's like about different characters. It's like TV shows do a backdoor pilot. It's like if there hadn't been a Mandalorian show, this would have been how they tried to pitch it to us. What do you think? Did you think it would have we would have been better served had those storylines happen within the context of the Mandalorian.
It's yeah. I mean, I like the idea of what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni want to do with a kind of, hey, this is all under one umbrella, and stories can happen everywhere.
Right.
But I think the challenge with the Book of Boba Fett was, unlike Mandalorian, which kind of came in with a clean slate. This is a new character that we had never seen before, so we didn't have. While we're excited about a Mandalorian-led show, there wasn't any of that those preconceived expectations. Unlike Boba Fett, who after Return of the Jedi, everybody is in their head had ideas for how he could have escaped the Sarlacc pit, whether it was in the comics picking up the story or books. Those ideas have been building for so long, since 83. And
Yeah.
so I feel like everybody, by the time this comes out, everybody was so like, yes, I want to see these things, that all these stories that have been kind of in my head or I've read about over the years brought to life on screen. And when it didn't happen in the way that I feel like people were kind of like, oh, so he's just gonna hang out with some Tusken Raiders for a few episodes, and then
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting until they killed them off. And I'm like, but that was
Yeah, interesting as a story, but the amount of time that was spent with them, the dances with Tuskens, the dances with Wolves storyline that we got there. Yeah, I think that from the time we got Mandalorian as a series and we got to know Din Djarin, we're like, oh my gosh, how great would it be if Boba Fett were to show up in the show? And then you get him, and then the episodes he's in Mandalorian, which is kind of like what you wanted out of him. But then it's like, oh, maybe he'll get his own show. And then you're like, oh, he shouldn't have gotten his own show, should he? So, yeah, I mean, I think that the bloom was already off the rose a little bit for The Mandalorian because of the fact that the Book of Boba Fett show was, just for me personally, it was really a letdown. And unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, this was also a letdown, which is not to say that there aren't some things that we can focus on that went well. Our pal Ivan Soto does say Mandalorian season 3 is my least favorite as well. Don't get me wrong. I still liked it, but it's definitely not my favorite. Yeah, we'll talk about things that we felt worked on it. But at the same time, it's just a letdown because the first 2 seasons I was so excited about, And
well, and
I
I know
mean,
Jon Favreau said that there is a gap of 2 years that supposedly Grogu
yeah,
spent with Luke on that planet, which
right.
is great in theory, but at watching it, you don't really get that sense of time, because really the only time we saw him without Grogu is for that part of that first episode that he was in the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And then after that, they kind of just start on their path to reuniting again. So we never really get to spend any time with Mando solo to see
Right.
how he's reflecting about being without Grogu and what those changes are. So it didn't feel like 2 years, even though we're supposed to just believe that.
And when you say solo, no pun intended. But speaking of reunions, stepping in right now is our pal Kate Cornell. Kaitlin,
Hi!
thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
We
Sorry I'm
appreciate
late.
it. That's all right. Time is, it's really just a construct of our minds and things.
It is.
We are still having sort of the general part of our conversation.
Cool.
Sort of just the big picture. We're talking about just how great the first 2 seasons of this show were, and the excitement level, and how the Mando episodes of Book of Boba Fett really stood above the rest of Book of Boba Fett. How did you feel, just on the whole, before we start going into the specifics, Kate? How did you feel season 3 measured up to the previous 2 seasons?
I don't feel like it did. And I think there was a reason for it. There were rumors going around, and I don't know if they're true, but it makes it seem like they're more true than not true. But I don't know if switching the protagonist from Din Djarin to Bo-Katan was always in the cards, because it is a Dave Filoni project, and that is his character, and it is about the Mandalorians and the Mandalorian covert. Unfortunately, I think the passing of the torch, a little bit literally taken in episode 6, was not the best thematic handoff that could have happened. If you were going to hand off who the Mandalorian was in this season and take away a character that everyone has come to know and adore, I think it deserved a little bit more story than that and a little bit more respect than that. And I don't think that the writing hit it on the level that they needed it to. And I think the fans were very vocal about that, which is why after, in Star Wars Celebration, they had suddenly announced that there was going to be a movie about Din Djarin, because they knew that they didn't give that character the send off that they needed to. So I hope Dave Filoni does a really good job with this character that has reignited the passion for the Star Wars universe, and that a lot of characters and a lot of people really love and a lot of fans really love. But we don't know. But it's been very clear that the Mandalorian TV show is going to be now more about Bo-Katan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably going, who knows exactly, but I feel like he wasn't the primary focus this season. And
the second she saw the mythosaur in episode 2, it was like, oh, that's it, that's over now.
Yeah, right. And then there's also there's what was it, episode 4 that wasn't about any of them, and it was like
I actually didn't mind that.
Days of Our Lives Coruscant edition, and that story in and of itself was fine, but the fact that it was 85% of that episode, and there was like interesting things happening with the Mandalorians at that point.
Yeah, and it was episode 3. It was the convert.
Yeah, the detour that they took from the main storyline was the first time where I was like, I'm kind of interested in this, but not when they gave it to me. I really wanted I wanted more of the storyline where we were, and they kind of bookended that episode. And again, I was talking earlier, Frank, about fill-in issues of comics. There was another time where I felt like they were like, what is this? Are they trying to spin off this and look, I in real life legitimately adore Tim Meadows. He was one of the nicest people when I was an intern at Saturday Night Live. I was so happy to see him join the Star Wars universe, but at the same time I was like, what is this? Again, it's not bad, but it's just like this should have been like a web series or a short or something. What were you going to say, Kate?
I disagree. The amount of, okay, how do I put this? This is the first 2 seasons for me were Dave Filoni's. This is why the prequel series is as good as it is. We get why the M count is needed. We get why Force healing is important. Like, we get a lot of the things, because that's his kind of goal. That was his goal with the Clone Wars, was the prequels were really good, guys. And you have to just understand how important it was to build up the Jedi and then have them come crashing down again, and then to spend more time with them in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and the hit becomes more palpable. And the amount of world building they did and world expansion they did in season 3, because we stayed with Din Djarin for the first 2 episodes. Episode 3, I think, came out of nowhere for a lot of people, but given how much world building they did and world expansion they did to kind of connect prequel to main series to sequel series, they're now starting to bridge the gap. They're starting to bring in the Necromancer project, where they were trying to bring Snoke and Palpatine back, and like why the cloning was important. They brought in the pirates, which in the lore of Star Wars is they used pirates, the ex-Empire used pirates to destabilize the outer rim and then the mid rim, so that people wanted more order and more structure, and so they were more willing to throw money behind Imperial forces to keep them safe. But they were, that line in the last episode where it's like the pirates didn't do their job in Navarro. Oh shoot, did we pay them enough? And like they were supposed to. It connects the pirates to the Imperials, which is super important. And having the Mind Flayer, which is a huge part of Star Wars lore, which is what Cara Dune was so scared of in the first season, and we see why she was so scared of it, and see the destabilization and how fractured the political system is in the New Republic, to see why the First Order could actually take power again after so little time. Everything kind of makes sense. It just came out of nowhere for a lot of people. And then you have the amnesty program being brought up in the 3rd episode, which comes back in the 6th episode. But the 6th episode didn't hammer in why any of those things were important. Like, if Jack Black did not say that he was part of the amnesty program, I don't think a lot of people would have caught it, because in the direction and the character building, it didn't really make any sense. but it's like you needed that doubt being sown into the world little by little by little by little, because a rebellion, even if it's an evil one, the Imperial's taking over back over again. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop. It happens little by little. And we're getting a little by little in this show, which is awesome.
And I think, getting little hints of, the first question that you can ask when you see the sequel trilogy. The first question, of course, is why? But then once you're actually sitting there and watching the movies, the question then becomes, well, how did that happen? How does the First Order rise to power? And so that is an interesting thing. And I think that you're absolutely right with Dave Filoni's focus on the prequel series. And it could even be generational. Perhaps you feel that they were also great. What I think about the prequel series is that they're better than most people remember, but they are still just incredibly flawed in the story, the way that they tell the story. The stories are actually all interesting, but it's a little tough to navigate. As someone who showed the original three films, to a 7-year-old in the past year, it's very hard to think taking on. Well, now you're going to go see trade negotiations and filibusters in the Imperial Senate, and just really racist trade negotiators and Watto. So there's issues with them, but I do like a lot of the elements of the story. And to sort of circle back on some of that, Frank, how did you feel when they devoted so much time in an episode of an 8-episode series, and it was, I don't know, it was probably like 30 of 40 minutes or something, to a storyline that I wasn't disinterested in. It's just I didn't want it when I got it, is really what I was trying to say. Well, how did you feel about the placement of that in episode 3? And there's somewhere in here, here's the comment from Ivan Soto. We'll just leave that up while we talk about it. Sorry for our audio audience. It says I hated episode 3 so much.
It's okay. I'm gonna need an entire therapy session on episode 6. So,
I'm waiting. You referenced it, but I'm not even gonna dive into that just yet. So,
I mean, somebody who loved Andor and just seeing the inner workings of the Empire.
Yeah,
I was excited when episode 3 came along. It's like, oh, this is cool. We can kind of see what the state of both the Empire and the New Republic are at this point, and just see what's happening. I just wish that it had been paid off more throughout the course of the season. I just felt like it excited me, and then it just didn't really, for me, kind of filter through enough of the season to really kind of like impact me. I was like, I want to like this more, but it just didn't pay off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it ties into the reveal that Moff Gideon's still around, but it's like, as soon as it's like, he never went to trial, I'm like, okay, well, we know he'll be back, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that was like, I felt like the Moff Gideon stuff, I felt it was just short shrift on him to do it just like those really quick last 2 episodes. I really wish that had been seeded earlier in the season, and just we kind of get chances to really build up to that.
Also, like,
it was so fast.
Episode 7 was called The Spies, and we only got one spy. Where's the other one? Where's the plural of the spy? I wish
still out there.
Kaitlin rewrite. We all know Kaitlin likes to rewrite crap on this show. I would have had the armorer be a spy.
And the way they edited
I thought it would have been so much cooler if there was someone in the covert allow it, because like she's the one that's like Mandalorian's curse, you can't go.
Yeah, and we see it's deliberately edited to see her in the ship flying back up through the atmosphere. We're spending so many times on those shots, like you're like, we're tipping visually at least that there's something up with the armor, and nothing happens.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. That was one of those too. That I was just like, we're getting this for a reason, and it's like, well, not really.
And then it makes sense where it's like, it would be more interesting for like, I wish that Din would figure stuff out. Like, it was mostly like him on the, like, his random knowledge of like the Ugnaughts, because it's like, oh yeah, remember season 1 when we all loved Queel? Remember that, guys?
I did like the callback to "I have spoken." That was one of that. It was like that to me. That was a better catchphrase than "This is the way." Just the way that.
Okay.
And the fact that the Ugnaughts don't speak in Empire Strikes Back, by the way, this sort of idea that like, oh no, they can talk. Just they were probably having some kind of labor dispute in Bespin, and Lando was in the middle of renegotiations and stuff.
But I also feel like I have spoken is not an Ugnaught phrase. It is a Queel phrase because he was an indentured servant. So
Yeah.
to not have a voice because he didn't have an opinion because he was a slave, basically. I have spoken is him retaking back his voice and his opinion now that he's earned his freedom. So I'm not sure. And because none of the other Ugnaughts said it, like, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like it's like, I feel like they took a huge part of Queel as a character away from him by making it substandard because you don't see any other Ugnaught saying it. You only know Queel.
Yeah, no, it's
If another Ugnaught said like we're not going to help you and I have spoken, and then they take it back and then Din puts it together, or Jaren, because Jaren is apparently his first name now.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Din was the title. Yeah, Din and Din Grogu.
Din is the
I don't know. I
last
mean,
name.
it's like the way that Asian names are presented, where the surname actually goes first. You know, so maybe it's just their.
Yeah,
but
Grogu
the way is now.
But to go back to why this is the way is the thing. It's the Jedi always represented like the Christianity side of the lore.
Sure.
And the Mandalorians were the Jewish side.
I never really thought of it that way.
The Torah translates to the way.
No, I know it. Yeah.
They have the hyper orthodoxy versus the casual practitioners.
Yeah.
They're spread out in a diaspora like stars in the galaxy. Like there's very clear connections to this lore connects to this lore and this lore connects to this lore, even if they're not equal or they're not completely representative. That's the base that they're taking it from. So
yeah, because it's not only can you only eat kosher food, you have to leave your helmet on the whole time while you eat. So good luck figuring it out.
It's like the hat.
Yeah. I do want to, before we sort of dive into what worked about this season, I will talk about, for me, the low point is episode 6, which is entitled Guns for Hire. That was the moment when the Mandalorian decided it needed to turn into the Love Boat of the Star Wars universe. Because look, we've already had Carl Weathers a number of times, including in this season. I love seeing Apollo, but we got Christopher Lloyd. Love seeing Christopher Lloyd.
The man in the DeLorean became the Mandalorian.
You got a bell for that one. Yes! So we have Christopher Lloyd. We have Jack Black, who, in full Jack Black. And we have Lizzo, for reasons unbeknownst to me. I don't know anything about her music. I just know what I've heard. I'm like, oh, that's not for me. I'm glad other people like it. So I don't have like a problem with. Yeah, it's not a problem with Lizzo. It's just more like, all right, but why? And it was just like, I think, guest star when they don't feel gimmicky. And I was like, oh, this was like the biggest gimmick of this is WWE style gimmickry. What did you think, Frank, of episode 6?
Yeah.
It's for as much as like it's irritating that we're citing like this kind of stunt casting, but at least Jack Black and Christopher Lloyd have the acting chops to make me at least buy into that they're part of this fabric of the universe. Lizzo, bless her, she just didn't have the acting chops to really make me buy that she was part of this universe and was the character that she was supposed to be in this episode.
Yeah, it's like when you see that they're giving away a walk-on role on a show, and somebody wins a contest, and you're just like, did like Lizzo's fans just enter a contest like a million times so that she could get on the episode?
And I think having so many cameos in one episode as opposed to like them fanning it out.
Yeah, I think that's really that it would have helped if it was over a few different episodes, I'm glad that Tim Meadows wasn't in that episode, because then I'd have to call him out too, so I'm glad that he got to and then also I don't know, I mean, that's like, those are the episodes that feel, the conceit of this show is in a lot of ways it is like a Western, you kind of, stranger comes into town, has to help with some problems, and then moves on. And I think that was definitely one of those. But it was a weak story, that specific story, that they have to, oh, we'll give you the information you need as long as you help us with our problem. Christopher Lloyd is the bad guy at the heart of it, and felt more like a waste of time than the diversion to other characters that weren't Mandalorian in episode 3. So yeah, I just felt like the stunt casting is the blatant problem with that episode, but it also was a fairly weak episode. Would you agree with either of those assessments, Kaitlin?
I would, but I want to expand on it because people who know who I am on the channel know that I'm a filmmaker, I'm a screenwriter, and a director, and just the story structure was really jarring in this one, and not jarring in a good way. It's jarring.
Yeah, not jarring.
Not jarring.
And also not Dodgers Spanish language broadcaster Jamie Harin. So it's none of those things. It's spelled the same way. It's none of those. Yeah, go ahead.
So from everything that had been established between episodes 1 through 5, we already know what the amnesty program is because it was in episode 3. We know that there were Imperial officers who are being rehabilitated by the New Republic. And we know that the New Republic is not taking the Outer Rim seriously. And we know that there are planets, Navarro not included, who have signed this charter and what the charter means. So we have a lot of already pre-established things in the world that the world building is giving us from the last 5 episodes. And then to episode 6 takes all of them and chucks them out the window and decides we're going to mention all these things, but they're not going to have any weight. So Jack Black's character, which God love you if you remember what his name was in the amnesty program. And you wouldn't know unless he said it. There's no close-up on the badge. There's no anything. And he's wearing the pin, the same one that they're all wearing in episode 3. Has he weaseled his way in to the Duchess's heart to take over her continent, to be a base, a landing base, or a trade hub for ex-Imperials so they can start rebuilding their planet or rebuilding their forces, even though they're not allowed to have an army on the planet? What is it actually for? They have a lot of battle droids that he's rehabilitated, but can they be called at any time? We don't know. Because no weight was put on what these characters were actually doing, and no doubt was placed in the world itself, where it's like, is there a bigger story happening here, or is this really just a one-off? Because Lizzo's character in The Duchess could have worked if she was either A, annoying / irritating enough to be like, why is Jack Black with her? If not for her power. Or naive enough to believe that everyone can be rehabilitated, or both. And then have that be, the constant friction where it's like, yes, honey, I know daddy's talking to the people that are going to take over. Also, you needed them to not want to talk to the Mandalorians right away, because what is preventing them from going to the Mandalorians right away is they're keeping them there because the monorail won't take them that far. So they need to keep them away for a purpose, as opposed to it being like, well, we need you to solve our problem for us. Can you do it? And if you're going to use any genre, there's no real visual kinesis, like synchronicity in any of these episodes, the same as seasons 1 and season 2, Western Samurai. There's no visual language that is the same, except for this episode is very clearly cop drama, forensic drama. And none of those directing tactics were employed correctly to make it feel like that, to make it feel like an out-of-world experience, to make it feel like this is really weird. So we're left with none of the characters mean anything. Nobody really matters. So the second you get to the privateers, the real guns for hire, the story that you really want, they have to wrap it up really quickly. And Din Djarin decides to treat the Darksaber like the Elder Wand, I guess, which, if that's really true, if you watched Rebels, the real owner would be Kenobi, because he's the one who defeated Darth Maul. So that doesn't make any sense anymore. So they're starting to rewrite things on the fly, but none of it had any weight. So I think that's why episode 6 didn't have the impact that it should have, because so much change happened to the story in this episode, and none of it meant anything. And none of it meant anything for the larger story or a larger story. And I think it was because they didn't know where season 4 was going to go. So if they wanted to go back to that planet and have Jack Black suddenly be a bad guy or the Duchess suddenly be naive, they can add to that story. But they didn't want to set it up too far in advance because they didn't know if they were going to use it.
That was my feeling, was that they want
Ivan Soto, it's because he defeated Darth Maul.
Well, hold on. The question in the chat from Ivan Soto is, how is Kenobi the real owner of the Darksaber? And Kate is saying, based on the rules of Episode 6, why would it be Kenobi? Because he defeated
Darth Maul. And so it was like, if the rules are you defeat the last person or disarm the last person who had it, it would be Kenobi.
Well, the thing that I would say about Din Djarin using the
unless my lore is off, and if my lore is off, I'm sure the comments will say it, and I'm sorry. I only have so much brain power for only so many fandoms, and I am sorry.
Din Djarin using the Darksaber, to me, every time he used it, it kind of felt like that one brief instant in Empire Strikes Back when Han Solo gets Luke's lightsaber and he's like, I guess I cut with this, and he slits open the tauntaun to put him inside. It was almost like, I guess a blade comes out of here, I got to be careful. So him giving it up wasn't something that I don't know. I could see if they had done it the right way, I could have been like, oh, this is a really big deal. But to me, Frank, it was always like, yeah, he barely uses that thing anyway. It's basically just for show. It's almost like having a pair of fuzzy dice hanging up in his ship.
It was set up at the end of season 2. It was such a great potential conflict where it's the only way that Bo can get it is by defeating Din. But you see like the relationship and the friendship and the respect that's forming between them. So it's like this would be an uncomfortable situation were it to come to blows to be able to get this. So how is this going to actually resolve itself? So I was interested going into season 3 how this is all going to pay off, and just to have it, this was probably the least interesting way that it could have resolved itself. It could have been helped better if it would have been kind of built up over the course of the episodes prior, but just to have it kind of resolved so quickly at the end of 6, I'm like, that took away one of the most exciting things I was looking forward to. Is like, how is this the ownership of the Darksaber going to get back to Bo-Katan? And this was the least interesting way that it could have happened.
Yeah,
I think why it would have been great if Din Djarin realized that there was a spy in the covert, and Bo-Katan is so obsessed with becoming the new leader of the covert that she doesn't really care about what that might do to Din Djarin, and Din Djarin doesn't know who he is without the covert. So you have a physical representation of a character's inner struggle with the fact that can he lift it or can he not lift it? Can he fight with it or not? And you have a physical representation of a character's inner struggle, which is always really great. We love that stuff. It's fantastic. But when you have a character that is unable to use a weapon, that is like, oh crap, I'm going to put my son over my covert and make that decision after trying to keep his son in the covert the entire time, and Bo-Katan on the Mandalore means more to me than your son does, and than you do, even though you've been my friend this entire season. That's a better face off. That means more. And if he loses it that way and has to go on the run and go into hiding, that would be a much better story.
Yeah, I think that there were a number of avenues that would have been better than the one they went with. I want to shout out one other good thing from the season, which was the surprise cameo appearance by Zeb from Rebels. That was fun to see him. And I was
Dave
not
Filoni
expecting
was in the last episode.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I went to the Paley Fest for Mandalorian, and I saw Dave Filoni in person for the first time ever. So I saw the hat, but also. I think we've all known people, maybe, in college, depending on your workplace, people on set. You see those people who have been burning the candle at both ends for so long that no matter, even if he'd gotten 10 hours of sleep the night before, which I'm sure he didn't, they're just so frayed and they're so burnt on everything. And I kind of saw him and I was just like, oh, that's what like true and utter exhaustion looks like, because of like all the stuff that he's working on. And then it just made me think, I'm like, are they spreading this poor guy so thin, he's doing the Ahsoka series, and he's probably got 4 series that they haven't announced yet, movies, and who knows, animation, live action. They've got him doing everything, and I don't know. I was just like, there were things I liked about this season, which we'll get into in a moment, but I don't know. I just wonder, and it's only 8 episodes, but I guess when you put and then if we were to do the runtime for these 8 episodes, it's probably like 6 episodes of an HBO series, where each week it's kind of a set number.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it's not like such a steep drop off in quality, but it was definitely a letdown in a lot of ways. But what I think I was happiest for, and I had texted a little bit about this with Kaitlin, was just so happy for Katie Sackhoff, who I loved on Battlestar Galactica. Just the amount of screen time she got and the amount of exploration of that character. It came, at the expense of Din Djarin, which we can talk about. But I just thought she was so much more interesting in her willingness to be like, no, I'll wear the helmet from now on. It's fine. I don't like living in my castle by myself. So if I want to fit in, I was wondering what you thought, Frank, about Bo-Katan, throughout the course of this season, but also as she's existed in the live action form, when we first met her in Mandalorian, through where she is at the end of season 3, sort of the journey, if you will.
I was super excited when she does see the mythosaur. I just what that meant for her character, because I was like, oh wow, this is not what I was expecting to happen in terms of where I thought the Bo Din kind of conflict would go through the course of season 3, but to have Bo come across something that she had kind of brushed off, just be encountered with real proof of the beliefs that she kind of like mocked of her from her parents in Mandalore, to see come face to face, like, oh my gosh, to see proof and what that changes, how it changes our worldview. I thought that was really interesting to see where that would take the character after that.
Yeah, what did you think, Kaitlin, what they did in terms of, continuing the story that, began so long ago, this character's arc that began in Clone Wars, basically, and, taking it through to now?
I love Katie Sackhoff, and I really, really love the fact that they got her back to do the live action version. And she's talked extensively about the difference between doing a voiceover of a character and then having to take the physicalization of that character, which is, it's interesting because Sam Witwer had an opposite experience doing Maul and having to take the live action version of Maul, the vocal performance of that actor, and then adjust it for his performance and doing a voiceover. And Katie Sackhoff had the opposite, where she had to look at how they animated her and how to put that in a live action setting. So she actually preferred to be under the helmet because she could do the crazy faces that she did in the booth, and she felt more like the character when she was behind the helmet, which I thought was really interesting.
No, that is interesting. Yeah.
What's interesting about her is I feel like there's a huge part of her that they did not mention and they didn't really go into, which is the fact that it's implied in the show how much she's like, the Mandalorians are stronger together. And I think she comes to that conclusion because of her relationship with her sister, Sabine. And Sabine was the peacekeeping Mandalorian. She was the one that was kind of ruling Mandalore, and Bo-Katan was the fighter. And she was in Death Watch. Her night owls were part of what ended up becoming the Children of the Watch. So this kind of terrorist organization was Bo-Katan, and she's kind of turning a new leaf. And I think that was a huge part of her character transition that they didn't put in, even if she's like constantly worried, like even if it's not like I'm turning a new leaf as you're watching me, I turned a new leaf off screen, but I'm a little terrified that I won't make the right decisions all the time because I'm not my sister. And that would have added a little bit more internal character conflict of like her sitting on the throne in that first episode. How much of that was her just, I'm trying to keep it together here. And I'm trying to be a leader, but I don't know how because everyone I was supposed to lead abandoned me when I lost the Darksaber. So am I really a leader or not? Similarly, in that last episode, when the Darksaber breaks, there's no real consequence of that. There's no real worry of, are you all going to leave because the Darksaber was broken? and I'm the one who caused it to break. And there's no recognition of like, did he break the kyber crystal inside of it? Could they reforge it? Because we have seen a broken kyber crystal reforged into a lightsaber with Kylo Ren. But it breaks, the symbol breaks, and there's no decision of that has been a symbol of Mandalorians fighting each other forever since its inception. And is it better? Is it a good decision from all of Mandalore that it stays broken? That is not finished. And I feel like that should have been a conclusion to her story, that they will follow her anyway.
Right, and I think that it was an interesting moment in the season where, to overextend Kate's metaphor from earlier, that she's the reformed Jewish Mandalorian, but she still keeps her devices turned off on the Sabbath. She still won't touch anything. So she's like walks in both worlds basically, and she was obviously the one to unite both factions. And this idea that even Moff Gideon couldn't believe that anyone got all the Mandalorians to agree on something, his sort of offhand comment. So I thought getting to see that, and that it wasn't as easy as, hey, everybody remember me. She had to fight her way for it, even though she didn't have to fight for the Darksaber, as we established. It was just more like, I took a nap, and I guess it's hers now. That's
I think
a little bit.
I think to expand on that point a little bit, Christian, it's a good point you make that she's the one who puts all the Mandalorians together, but she doesn't do it in a vacuum. She needs Din to support her from the other side.
Yeah. And
the fact that the pledge comes in episode 7 is very, very late. And it's okay to have it there, but she kind of has to, they didn't acknowledge in the writing, and maybe they were hoping it would be acknowledged in the performance, but they also have a positive and a handicap in the fact that one of your characters has no face. And it's all of the actions that he has done. The pledge basically meant all of the actions I've done for the past few episodes have been because I believe in you.
Right.
And I know you can't do it without my help. And I know you can't do it without, it's not up to you to lead us alone. You need everybody. And you need support from our side. And I'm willing to be your support, and I'm willing to serve you because I believe that you're the path forward. I believe that you are the way. And I will do it until your song is written.
As
opposed to this, it being this weird ass kind of I pledge my allegiance to you, lady. It felt so like knight to queen as opposed to warrior to warrior.
I agree, because we said even Paz after the armor says what the deal is with Bo-Katan. She walks in both worlds, and she's cool with taking her helmet off. I mean, Paz looks at Mando, at Din, just are we cool with this? Is this cool? And he's like, yeah. He just gives him that look of we're going with this. So I mean, I feel yes, you're right. He needs it's. Din giving yes, we're sticking with we're sticking with her.
Yeah, and to acknowledge that the passing of the Darksaber, which is how Bo-Katan lost it in Rebels, is she was handed it by Sabine. It's to be handed the Darksaber is very frightening because that's how everything went to shit before. So it's the aspect of the reason why I've done all of these things. The reason why I will go, I gave you the Darksaber. I helped you in the, build this diplomatic whatever in episode 6. I helped you with the Ugnaughts. I'm helping you now is because I believe that you can pull everyone together. But also, we don't understand why that matters so much to Din.
I think the interesting thing with, Din sort of, basically redeeming himself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka, or the waters of Mandalore, as it were. The idea is that this is the first season where we don't see him with his helmet off at any point, unless I'm not remembering something.
He did not
but
take his helmet off.
In the first 2 seasons, there's a number of times, and it was situational. There were times where it's you're going to go undercover as an Imperial. You can't wear that dumb helmet.
He only takes it off 3 times in the whole show.
Right. But I mean, he didn't do it at all this season. So I thought that it was significant that once he's back on the path, once he's back on the way, it's, he's not going to deviate from it. Let's focus on sort of the, what made this show catch on the way it did the first episode. We haven't really talked that much about Grogu. What do you feel, Frank, about his arc through these 8 episodes? I have some strong feelings, but I want to let you go first.
I feel like Grogu was great at first, and I feel like I'm running into issues now with Grogu, given that he is of Yoda's race and he is so long-lived that it makes any sort of growth in that character and change. It makes it's like impossible to happen, really.
Well, let me just interject for a minute, Frank. You'll be fine in season 600. That's when it's really going to pick up. Yeah,
Great.
He'll be the character you want him to be in season 600. But anyway, finish your thought that you were trying to make.
Oh no, so it's just I grew tiresome of it this season, where it's just like I need this character to evolve and grow and be able to interact with Din in a different way than he is. I mean, I as a person like you searching for anything in a like water in a desert, I will take the little bit that we got in episode 8 and to see them interacting as they're fighting off with Moff Gideon and his troopers at the end. We see how they can kind of work together. Great, but that's not. I need this character to be able to age and grow and have a different relationship with Din, and I feel like that's the handicap for this character, given the race that he is part of.
Yeah, that he's only like whatever in his like late 50s.
52.
52. And there's the moment where, they say, well, he's too young to talk and to say the oath. So I thought there was like, well, can we just see that he can talk? Wasn't that the moment where
I was shocked we didn't get a first word. And arguably people have said he said thanks and he's attempted this is the way.
No.
In the last episode, he's like, good job, kid. And he goes, thanks. That's an argument that has been made. It is an argument I disagree with.
I just wanted, some utterance from Frank Oz run through of some kind of, voice modifier. Yes, one of those things. And that would have been great. But I agree that it's...
What did you think of the yes, no?
I thought it was funny at first. I actually thought that it was going to be able to say other things besides yes and no. But I thought I was going to call him IG-88, but the IG-11 as like a suit, I just thought it was stupid. And it made me dislike Grogu's storyline because it was like, he's so little. It's very difficult to justify some of those sequences in. So let's put him in this. And I was glad when it got destroyed. I was like, all right,
so put a jetpack on it, man.
Yeah,
like
right, exactly.
Put a jetpack on.
You got all this armor. Like you can build something for him. He doesn't need to have, he doesn't have to have this IG-11 suit that he's like squished into.
There was this when he gets left behind with the armor. In the one episode, as they're going to rescue Paz's son, and there's that scene where the armor goes, "Well, come with me, Grogu," and he is so far outside. He's so far outside the cave. I'm like, that must have taken him like an hour to walk in and meet with her at the forge. Why
I'm also shocked that didn't come back. That the Praetorian Guard didn't like hit him in the chest, and it almost be like and then you see that he's got the chest plate.
Yeah.
Also, my thing here's my thing about Grogu. He is essentially from Book of Boba Fett rejected the Jedi way to stay with Mando, which means he has an attachment, which means that he is more Sith prone now, and he acts selfishly. And this is probably the most selfish season he's been in. If he wants something, he grabs it. If he wants something, he just like force pulls it to him. He eats everything. He wants his treats. He'll complain. He'll cry. Like he's very
Grogu better be careful. He's going to get canceled in season 4.
Yeah, he's very like really instant gratification. And yes, he's a baby, but like we also need him to start growing a little bit. Yeah. But because he's more, we have to see a consequence of him using his powers for selfish reasons. And I think a good opportunity they missed was the Praetorian Guard, because Praetorian Guards are like notoriously the best. They're named after the Roman legion, and they were the red guys from Last Jedi. That was the good fight that everyone got too tired of. But if like they're in that like the war room from Doctor Strangeloves, and he's on the top of all the lights, which I kind of hate that as a shorthand now that everyone uses that internal light structure from Doctor Strangelove to be like, look at this evil war room, guys. I wish that Mando just watched in the doorway, like he feels like he has to go save his son, and his son is just going ham, force choking the crap out of these people.
I did wonder
because he can.
Yeah, I did wonder if we were gonna get, like one of the high points for most people in the prequel trilogy is in Attack of the Clones when Yoda just goes off, and then
on Dooku.
And then he, picks up his cane again and starts limping. But it's like, oh yeah, just like the idea of what he could be capable of. So I did wonder, and there were little flashes of it, but it goes back to what Frank was saying. It's like they've really held back on what he can do. And all right, if he was with Luke for 2 years, I mean, I don't know. Was Luke on Dagobah for like a week before he left? I mean, maybe. I don't even think it was a week. And somehow by like Return of the Jedi, he's like this master Jedi, And I was like, it's like he didn't even do like the Army Reserves where, you go on the weekend. I don't even think he put in that much time. So now he's a general. So I feel like Grogu should have been far along, and whatever his species is, they're probably, more force prone than a lot of others. So I think it's a little bit of a letdown that I don't need him to be, like a killing machine. I don't want like Berserker Wolverine style Grogu.
I do. It would add a layer to something. It would add something.
No. But if he's like, knocking things over and, knocking people out or killing them that way. I don't want him like ripping somebody, using the force to tear people to shreds. I don't need any of that from Grogu. I mean, yes.
Darth Grogu.
Sure.
Darth Din Grogu. Yes, do it.
I mean, season 5, maybe. But I agree.
Imagine like the AI art that's going to come out of like, I want someone to send one to me. Just send me evil baby, like Darth baby Grogu. I will love you forever.
Yeah. Ivan has
like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I'll say this and then you get Ivan has this point. Grogu is what Ahsoka pretends to be. He's not a Jedi, but still uses his powers where she's a Jedi, even if she says he's not. I just thought that was a good observation. Thank you, Ivan. What were you going to say, Frank?
Yeah.
Also, why does he get knighted in episode 6? He does fucking nothing.
Sorry.
He just jumped into her arms a lot. And that was, and helped
like, you're cute. You're a knight now of this.
I mean, it's because his dad's a celebrity. Basically, it's like the real world. It's like why is Elton John a knight? I mean,
that would have also been a great opportunity for a little bit of doubt to be sown into how much Jack Black actually gives a crap about the Duchess.
Yeah,
where it's like he steps forward, like Din steps forward to be like, you have a sword pointed at my baby. And it's like, no, she does this all the time. It's really annoying.
She just gives them away so she doesn't have to pay bar tabs. But what was your point going to be, Frank, about
night people?
It's just like with Grogu, like even if you think maybe when the Rey film happens, 10 years after the Rise of Skywalker, maybe Grogu could be, somewhat interactive at that point, but it's like, it's a bummer that you'd have to wait that long in the timeline. And like,
so that's like
gone. Maybe
what would that be like? So, the Rise of Skywalker is like 20 years from this point.
30.
Okay, so then that's 40. So he's almost 100 by that point, and you gotta hope that he's not being referred to as the child anymore. I think Grogu is,
or that have like she goes to Navarro, and you get like him in the hut, and Din has just passed away, and he's got the helmet on the wall.
No, Grogu's the chief magistrate on Navarro by that year, by 10 years after Rise of Skywalker, and Carl Weathers has passed on. And, oddly enough, his son looks like Michael B. Jordan. But, I'm just coming up with possible casting choices.
Michael B. Jordan would kill in Star Wars. He would be the best.
I think that there probably would look for a better role for him than the one that I just created. Carl Weathers' son. But
there's always something about like Star Wars that I think is cool for me when you look at the universe and you might see like a Wookiee that's a Jedi. And you're like, whoa, that's really interesting. How the heck did that happen? I want to know that
Yeah.
story. So same thing with Grogu. Later on, as he gets older, a Mandalorian that is of Yoda's race. Like objectively, you're like, whoa, that's really wild. How the heck did that happen? And I don't know if we'll ever get a chance to see that. Or if
but
that's
I
what
mean,
they
he
do.
could, he could have his own, armor, but then maybe he does spend some time actually, being a Jedi. So he's got the armor and a lightsaber, not a dark saber and a lightsaber. I think that what I was going to say about Grogu, it's sort of like, I don't know. I mean, I think they knew what they had in the way of this character, but I don't know that maybe the plan was to have him be around for the entire series. I mean, there was a clear out for there was a very clear ending to that story at the end of season 2. They didn't even need to go that long. Is Grogu up there with like, Fonzie and Steve Urkel and characters that shows weren't supposed to be about, but it's like, well, this is the breakout star, and I'm going to make Ivan Soto mad because I'm going to invoke one of his favorite shows, Gotham. The actor who played the Penguin on that show was so good that they felt like they had to have him in almost every episode. I was like, well,
Yeah.
no, that's not what was good about it. He's great. I didn't like that show after a little while, but I always thought that actor was great. But I was like, well, we didn't need him every week. You don't try to force its way into there.
No.
So I don't know. I think if they could have had a season where Grogu was off with Luke training and, he could have come back later, that I think it would have been fine, in all honesty. I think he's adorable. I think he's a great character. It's the one thing from the Star Wars universe that's most easily identifiable to my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old is they call him Baby Yoda, but that's because most people call him Baby Yoda, but they do both know his name is Grogu, because otherwise there'll be no dinner if you don't know what his real name is.
Wow.
And just to illustrate my point, Ivan Soto was very excited as soon as I mentioned Gotham, but it's the example I was to use. And it's just like, I don't know, did we need so much Grogu? And I think I didn't feel that for an instant in either of the first 2 seasons. But I think because of where his story logically would have gone, I wasn't disappointed that he was back when the season started. But as it went along, I'm like, I mean, he's got a new ship so that Grogu can sit in there with him. There's I don't know. It's just
So you have this badass starfighter and you don't use it.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You use it. Like, I feel like the first 2 episodes were like in plan. And the last 6 episodes were like something happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true. I'm not
I
dialed into
feel
all
like
the Star
I
Wars
don't
gossip.
know. I'm not an investigative journalist, but I feel like something happened because the first 2 episodes of this season were very in line with the last 2 seasons we've got of Mandalorian. Same visual style, everything connected, everything made sense. The character development happened. You got good arcs, you got good story. And then after episode 3, everything just went haywire and it got into this really kind of dull play where it's almost like they decided to switch vehicles and they were having trouble starting the car. It felt like every episode it was like the engine wouldn't turn over. And I'm like, guys, you're ahead.
I remember one of the thoughts you had is that you felt like the directing left something to be desired.
Yeah.
And the surprising thing is what I consider to be the weakest episode of the entire series, let alone the season, is that 6th episode. It was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who had previously directed some excellent episodes of this show. But
did she?
Carl Weathers directed episode 4, which I didn't know until I looked at this list right now. I don't think I noticed that. But Rick Fumiyawa let me just point out, Rick Fumiyawa directed most of the episodes of the season. He did 8, 7, and 1 of this season. So that's almost half of it. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Kate?
Well, Rick Fumiyawa is amazing. And he directed arguably the 2 best episodes of the last 2 seasons, which was The Prisoner from season 1 and The Believer from season 2. Right. And that and his episodes reflect that in season 3. They've got a similar visual language. They've got a similar visual tone. They've got a similar thematic tone. They're darker. They're grittier. They deal with a little bit of what is the selfishness of this universe? Where does power come from? Is morality black and white, or is it a gray area? like those are the questions that he's answering in this universe. The questions that they tried to answer in the sequel series and they didn't really succeed at because Disney needed a binary. And so they made him an executive producer this season, which was great. But I wish that they had made the decision, and I don't know why they didn't do this. Rick should have directed all of them. They should have done what they did with WandaVision and have one solo director set the visual tone, especially since everything else was changing. If they were going to switch their protagonist that suddenly, they needed to keep something the same. They needed a through line. They needed someone on the steering wheel going, I know I'm using a lot of car metaphors, this is where we're going. This is where we are headed. And Rick is a good choice. Rick is a smart director. He's a calm director. He knows how to work with actors. He's a good technician. He understands visual storytelling. And he's solid. Like, he understands how to work within a genre. Not just the space cowboy genre, but like you had a prison escape episode and a heist movie were his last two basic episodes. So he can work in when the genre shifts. He can work those changes very well.
But I think that, what it entails to direct, I was going to say an hour, but in an episode of television, I think the only person that probably could have directed all of them would have been Favreau, just because he is, he and Dave are the masterminds behind it. So you could, it's like how showrunners of shows, Terry Matalas directed the last two episodes of Star Trek Picard. Matt Weiner on Mad Men would direct the season finale every year. So it's like your showrunner directs when they can. But I just think it would have been too much. And just the way I described Dave Filoni earlier, just how exhausted he looked, he should direct 0 episodes ever. I think he's got too much on his plate. I don't think he should take that on.
Didn't they name Rick as one of the showrunners?
Yeah. But it's, it's a lot. There's, I think when it's an interconnected universe and you're going to have all these shows that are going to be, running concurrently, it'll be interesting to see, who's actually doing what, I think that, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I don't feel like Favreau's working on anything else right now, like he's checked out to do some movies, but maybe he is doing something Star Wars related.
Well, I think what they did with there was a director of the first season, Deborah Chow, who took over the entirety of Kenobi.
Right.
And yes. I feel like now that they've started to set the universe, like Mandalorian and Mandalorian season 1 when it came out, it was the only thing. And you can kind of bop back and forth between directors, especially when you've set a strong character, a strong overarching arc. You're starting a series and each episode has a different kind of Western take on it, a Western genre that they're playing in.
Sure.
And so you can have you can pass off to different directors and see what they do, almost like an audition to where else can we put you in the Star Wars universe? And the fact that they have done that with Deborah Chow for Kenobi, which definitely, regardless of what you think about Kenobi, was structurally and thematically sound. It had a visual landscape. It had a visual language that we could all this is Kenobi. This is it.
Yeah, I think that
snap in. But they didn't have that for Mandalorian this season, and I feel like it was missing that.
Yeah, it wasn't as unified. And what I know, I mean, it the post production takes so long on this stuff. I think that this season was, of course, the first of Mandalorian that would have been heavily impacted by COVID protocols with production and, all of that, because just from what they said, that timeline, because the earlier seasons, they could do whatever they wanted, do whatever season 2.
Season 2 was filmed peak pandemic.
It was filmed then. I thought it was just post-production, but I'll defer to you if that's the case. But then they still would have had those issues with season 3. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. I feel like, there's the Bo-Katan storyline, but I don't think Mando and Grogu retiring to Navarro means that, we're done with them on this series or movie or whatever. I think that we'll still see a fair amount of them. I that's my expectations, because They are the characters people like. And I'm the one who just said a few minutes ago that Grogu is the Steve Urkel of the Star Wars universe. So clearly you're not going to be able to say goodbye to him. Before I get some more thoughts from you, Ivan Soto has this great observation. Din Djarin and Din Grogu are the only healthy father-son relationship in Star Wars. And I read that a few minutes ago, and I've been trying to come up with someone else. I mean, maybe, Bail Organa and Leia, they seem to have a decent relationship.
That's what I was going to say, the Organas.
But it's, he's saying father-son, but I'm like, I'm just settling on any kind of parent child relationship, and I'm like, that's the one I can come up with.
Also, I would argue Qui-Gon and young Anakin.
Yeah, but he's not actually father-son relationship.
I mean, okay, I bring this up a lot, but are you going to say that like Iroh was not a father figure to Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender?
You used a lot of words just there, and it's something that I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm going to say sure, because
father
it's easier
figure,
to
father, because Din is technically not his father either.
No, but he adopts him officially, and Bail Organa adopts Leia.
Yeah.
I mean,
Qui-Gon
those
Anakin.
are fathers, I think. But anyway, the point is, there's some really bad father-son relationships. I would say that that Han and Ben Solo is actually worse than Anakin and Luke. I think that they have a much worse relationship. What do you think should be and will be the future of this show? I'll ask you first, Kaitlin, and then I'll ask Frank the same thing. What do you think future seasons of this specific show, Mando season 4?
I don't know. I think it's going to be about how to actually rebuild Mandalore. God, I don't even know. I can only speculate.
Yeah,
and I'm also trying to be like,
that's why we're here.
I can only speculate, but also like, I think that taking the right hand turn to making it Bo-Katan's story, it's like the least interesting thing about it.
Yeah.
So I personally, I don't know. They're not going to do it. They're going to wait till the movie, but I would have stayed with Din and have him try to like clean up and work with the New Republic finally to clean up some of the Imperials and start getting a little bit more like investigative of like connecting what is happening in the Outer Rim to the building of the First Order. And I thought that would have been really cool to have this like lone gunman start to figure out this story and keep it kind of outside of being, completely invested and enveloped in it as the Star Wars movies do. But unfortunately, I don't know how they're going to get Bo-Katan off of the Mandalorian planet anymore. And because they're kind of stuck there for a little bit, unless they do a time jump into the future. And which Mandalore 5 years later, Grogu can talk, Grogu can walk. Like and something happens, something hits this new almost rebuilt Mandalore, and they have to reunite again and have to go solve the problem. But it's the question now comes is, how are they going to get her off the planet if the story is really about her? If it does stay on the planet, how are they going to make it interesting between all of these factions? Because they've all now decided to work together, so they have to now break that apart in 5 years. And it's the struggle to keep everyone together. But is that going to be interesting enough? They still have to connect it to this larger universe that they've started expanding in season 3. And the only character that can really be a part of it, they've siphoned to Navarro. And he might not be the main character anymore. So I don't know how they're going to reconcile how to make it interesting without doing a time jump.
Well, my takeaway from the way that the season ended was that it was going to be a lot less about Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorians, and that's why the Dins were both sent off. And the setup was basically like, you have to go have your own adventures without any of us in your own series. So I that's what I expect to have. Not that there won't be appearances and there won't be trouble on Mandalore and there won't be reasons for him to go there. But I think we'll get some more standalone adventures, him helping out the New Republic, for the problems that, Tim Meadows is just shuffling papers on his desk, making sure he doesn't sign anything because he doesn't want to be responsible for anything. I mean, that's That's what brought down the New Republic is bureaucracy, it seems like. What do you think, Frank, about what this specific show, we're not talking about all the other potential spin-offs and movies and standalones and who knows what else. What do you think season 4 of this show is going to look like?
The interesting thing for me was Moff Gideon meets with all those other folks from the Empire, and you really,
Oh
really,
yeah, the Dark Council.
yes, and they're all talking about like how dangerous it would be if the Mandalorians head back to Mandalore. So especially when you take Moff Gideon off the table, I don't know how the rest of them don't go like, we've got to just bomb Mandalore into oblivion, so and stop this now before it gets any worse. So for me, it's like, how does it not become like an ever-present thing of like, how do these Mandalorians on Mandalore with such low they couldn't even stop the Empire when they were in at greater strength than they are now. So how would they stop even a fraction of the Empire that was just hell-bent on making sure Mandalore doesn't rise again? But
Well,
I don't know.
I think that the amount of focus there was in conversation, the chatter, as it were, in the series about where Grand Admiral Thrawn was, and then the fact that the last episode was called The Return, I was like, well, clearly we're going to kill off Moff Gideon. And through the credits, I'm like, well, we're going to see Thrawn, and I know that they've cast him and all, for a live action, and then we didn't get him at all, and I was like, oh, okay, so they just wanted to set that up for somewhere down the road. I had no reason to not expect him. I felt like they kept talking about him, and it's like, oh, are you even really talking to him? I was like, okay, well, so we're going to show that once Moff Gideon's gone, this bigger presence will fill that void, more than fill it, really. So, I mean, it's another, I mean, he's going to be in the Ahsoka show, I guess, is where we're supposed to see him. And I think
Thrawn as Thrawn comes in the Ahsoka show.
Yeah. It's just like, for me, it's, if does Moff Gideon need to exist in a world where Grand Admiral Thrawn is going to show up? Maybe not. But that still doesn't mean that you can't invest in him in this season, and not just hit the pedal to the metal in episode 7 and 8 and rush through him making clones of himself and making him force capable, and they're immediately destroyed so rapidly. Why this season didn't seed the Moff Gideon storyline throughout the season to really at least for payoff at the end seems, if he's never going to come back, at least treat the character, make it more of a richer story and a more menacing character throughout the course of the season.
And that would be really...
just a quick thought to piggyback on that. Even if it was like, he's only available for 2 episodes during the season, where you could still have told the story without actually showing him. I think you're right. Dealt with it a little bit earlier. It definitely is the part of the season that felt rushed more than anything else. And it could have used some time to breathe. What were you going to say, Kate?
Also, it's a really good opportunity to start using credit sequences in Star Wars shows to start connecting the wider universe. So something that the phase 1 of the MCU did really, really well was you start getting this, like, no matter what the bad guy is, you start getting like a hint to the next movie or how things all are connecting. And Mandalorian and Ahsoka are connected. And like they're starting to build off of their own universe. And it would have been really great to start to kind of get pieces of like what is coming up next. Who is the big bad now that we've lost Moff Gideon, especially since this seemed like a pretty tight wrap up. Like they've never done that the little like circle cut, that little like on the 2 of them before. That's never been used in Star Wars. So it's like they've kind of like set this, like, this is the picture perfect ending, but we know there's going to be a season 4. So it would have been great to have like a look at this picture perfect happy family, but here's the next big bad that you all can look forward to in Ahsoka.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would have been great if, Nick Fury had walked in and been like, well, Din Djarin, I want to talk to you about the Mandalorian initiative. And, and then it would have been some variation.
I heard your decision, but since it's a stupid ass decision.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We're not going to do that.
I
heard what you said.
They've got so much else coming up that I'm sure they know when we're going to get more Mandalorian, but it's not going to be for a while.
No.
I don't know. Look, they've put him and Grogu together now. So, all right, those are the adventures we're going to get. I still more enjoyed the show than I didn't. It was just such a steep letdown from the first 2 seasons that
It was
it
a
was a little
steep
disappointing.
world expansion and a deep and a dive character expansion. So it's
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
world
and I
went
think
up
that
and
you're
the
absolutely
characters
right.
went
Yeah,
down, and we're just like, where are we going?
yeah.
So you have an audience. If I don't know if anyone from Star Wars listens to this, if I offended you, I am sorry. But I love this universe and I love this fandom and I love this character. So, and I'm not the only one who feels that way.
The
So please, I would love to know. And I think that a lot of people just felt really lost. The character that they had attached themselves to for not just the 2 seasons of Mandalorian, but when Boba Fett became Mandalorian 2.5. Like, you have this beautiful character that everyone has attached themselves to that reinvigorated your universe, and people now know a lot more about the world, but they don't care as much because it's not connected to the character that they cared about.
Yeah. And the only person from Star Wars who listens to this show is Bruce Valanche, who wrote the Star Wars Holiday Special. But so we're always glad to have
Bruce,
him.
you were my hero. I love you. Thank you for that
in any
lovely
case,
piece.
I can't wait to see what's next and when we get it. And there's a lot of shuffling around at Disney Plus. There's of course an animated series coming from Disney Plus that some of us are very excited about. Frank, I know you can't comment, but we're excited about whenever we get it. I think it's safe to say that we're anticipating a certain animated show. There's live action. There's like 2 Marvel series that I think we were expecting to have seen already by this point in the year, but we will get. We'll get Secret Invasion, and obviously we've got Ahsoka, and a bunch of other things coming our way. But it's going to be a while before we get Mandalorian.
And we've got the Acolyte coming up too, guys, which I am stoked about with a capital S.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Frank?
With the Bad Batch ending, I would love just another animated series set after Return of the Jedi with Han, Luke, Leia. Give us all those characters that we're never going to get to see again in live action, and tell us that story in between to bridge the gap between the film.
They did a great job with about 30 years ago with some novels and comics that told a lot of those stories with Luke and Han and Leia and Chewie and R2 and 3PO, and then they decided to make more movies, and they kind of shook the Etch-a-Sketch on those, and the only thing they really kept was Grand Admiral Thrawn. Great character, by the way, but I thought there was some fairly decent storytelling that we got there, and that was like
Mara Jade. The fact that we fun fact, we had a cat named Mara Jade after that character. So that her name at the shelter had been Mara, and we added to it. So that was a very popular character in my house. But in any case, it's always fun to be able to talk about these things, and I don't know. Sometimes it's like you need to vent about the negatives, because I don't know about either of you. There's not that many people when I'm not doing a show like this that I can complain about the things that I didn't like. Occasionally it'll come up in conversation, and this was not the first time that I had mentioned that the Mandalorian turned into the Love Boat, but I felt like the two of you would appreciate it.
That's funny.
But
it's also good. A lot of people on these shows. I feel like I have to end on a positive because I needed a therapy session on this show. A lot of people worked incredibly hard to make the show happen.
Absolutely.
Like, people don't intend to make something bad. They
right,
want
and I'm not saying that they did.
And I'm not saying that they did, and I feel bad because I feel like I had a therapy session, and that happens.
Book of Boba Fett, I would say that they came fairly close to making just an outright bad show, but I also feel like people were well intentioned and worked incredibly hard on that show.
The VFX
just choices were made that
the production people who work really hard, the writing staff, the everyone who was on the ground, the grips, the lighting department, the transportation office, like, you guys are amazing if you work on the show. And I wish the show was better for you guys, and I wish the show was better for the fans. I hope we get more stuff, and I hope next season we get that's why they did it that way. And I hope that I am proven wrong by I just didn't understand it. But when we criticize things, we just have to make sure that It's for the purpose of how can it be better? What would I have done differently? How do we engage with this fandom, especially because Star Wars is a very divisive fandom. We have to be careful, especially when we enter this universe, that we're not just angry because it's not our Star Wars. It's how does this expand my view of this universe, and how can it be better?
Yeah, I mean, also let's not be too precious, because for me, my Star Wars includes both Ewoks TV movies. So it's it's like you're not only holding things up to
Frank,
you're not
happy
only
Life
holding-
Day, pal.
Well, I mean, it's a little early for that's the thing about Life Day. Life Day, the store starts stocking Life Day robes earlier and earlier every year. They skip Thanksgiving. They go right from Halloween to Life Day, and it's just infuriating.
And if anyone's listening, I want a Dr. Aphra series right now. Like, can we
that
just
would be
announce
great.
Dr. Aphra?
I mean, I'm sure that's somewhere there's an email thread that Dave Filoni's on, deep in, he's like got a pitch for season 6 of Dr. Aphra.
Just
so
keep oh god, what's his name? Keep Christensen in the suit. Keep Hayden in the suit.
Hayden Christensen.
And then like give me Dr. Aphra. With the 2 psycho droids and the big Wookiee, like, just do it.
Yes,
I do. Yeah, I do like the big Wookiee. But anyway, there'll be more to talk about. Later in the year. There's always the Star Wars shows. I feel like are easier to discuss in bulk. Having done a weekly Mandalorian reaction show for AfterBuzz, the first season was fun, but there were those weeks where you had like 28 minutes of story to talk about, So it's and I feel like it's easier to judge, because I talked about this, that I think I had a very different reaction to Kenobi than a lot of people I knew, because I was traveling when it premiered. I fell behind, so I just waited for it to end, and I watched it all over like a day and a half, and I'm like, oh, I really liked it. Because I didn't have the weeks between episodes to let it sit in of like, here's what I didn't like. And that's another one of those things where it's like, Ewan McGregor puts on the robes and, he sits and reads the Imperial phone book. I'd probably enjoy that too, so the bar was set very low, right up there with Ewok's Caravan of Courage. But that's the end of our conversation for this installment. If people want to keep in touch, Frank, people are going to want to know, where can I find you besides on the next Bladtcast talking about Star Trek Picard? Where can people find you apart from that?
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie, and hopefully X-Men will be out before the end of the year. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And,
wait, what?
Speaking of X-Men, Kate, where can people find your film?
I did a Rogue and Gambit short film, Frank, that,
Nice.
Yeah. So you can find it on Instagram at Uncanny Film. And you can also find it on my page at Cornellable on Instagram. You can find it on YouTube, the Uncanny and X Universe fan film.
And Alexa Capiello was in that. She played Rogue for you, right?
Happy Cappy's in it. Yes.
Happy Cappy,
my lovely, lovely roommate, my lovely, lovely friend. Love her to death.
Happy Cappy at Universal. So
yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, she kicks ass as Rogue.
Yeah,
she's her performance is incredibly layered. I'm so excited for her.
The Universal Tour Guide fraternity, just all inclusive. And Frank, I know sometimes you do stuff with our pal James Lott, who we knew from AfterBuzz. Are you still doing General Hospital regularly, or is that more like once in a while?
Still regular. We'll be back this Sunday with another hot edition of the soap that is anybody still watching? I am, but if you want to talk about it and join us on Sundays.
I've told you this before, but it's I feel like for people that stick with soap operas, it's like for my grandmother, General Hospital, she started watching when it first premiered, whatever, in the 50s or early 60s. And it was like, especially when my grandfather retired, their life revolved around making sure that they were either back at their house by 3:00, which is when it aired in New York and New Jersey, or they had to stay at our house for dinner, because it was like, they had to leave early and make sure they got back home. Yeah, there were, because there weren't VCRs, and then at their house there wasn't one either. And it's just like, I don't know, it gets to be to a certain point where it's like you stick with a show like that. How long have you been watching General Hospital, Frank? I'm fascinated.
Probably 20 years, thanks to my grandma. My grandma got me sucked in.
Yeah, and it's like, now if you were to like miss something, you can catch up on episodes. But they're that point of like, if you miss like Wednesday, you're gonna be lost for like the next 2 months because they're like, what happened? Weren't they trapped in an elevator? How did they get out? I don't know what happened. That sort of it. But anyway, I think it's great, and obviously, I know James has a lot of shows over there, and he was always a great presence over there at AfterBuzz, as was our pal Frank Moran, and it's delightful to get to talk to you again.
Pleasure's all mine.
Strange New Worlds is starting up in about 7 weeks. So we'll be able to talk about that.
I can't contain myself right now. I would like the ship to go now.
Yes.
Like, I can't. I also have a podcast called The Final Frontier where I interview scientists about science fiction. So that's my other thing. And I love.
And where can people find that? On the Geekscape Network, perhaps?
Yeah, on the Geekscape Network, perhaps. And I'm restarting it because I got distracted by making an X-Men short film for reasons. But I can't. Wait.
Speaking of the Geekscape Network, our pal Eric Connor and I will be over there on Sunday talking about, oh my gosh, my green screen.
The green screen's bad.
So you can't see that. Here's the face of Adam Warlock. But it's a story called The Infinity Entity, which it ended in such a way that I'm like, oh, now we have to do also read the Infinity finale because it's really just set up another story they didn't realize. But for people who can actually see, oh, there it is. I eventually got it.
Alan Davis, how can you go wrong?
Yeah, and Ron Lim. That was what hooked me. And Alan Davis's work on Excalibur is still beloved in my mind. But none of that's right now. Right now, we were just talking about Mandalorian. And on our next audio episode, it will be as I described it earlier, an Oreo triple stuffed edition where we really dive in to Star Trek Picard. And this is going to be the episode from people who liked it. Then we're going to have another episode where I talk to people who absolutely hated it. So that's always fun too. But the positive one, Frank, for once, you're part of the positive. Frank is the ray of sunshine. Tom Kelly and David Weiss are the rain on our parade for all those of us who enjoyed Star Trek Picard. So please check that out next time. And we will see you next time on the Bladtcast.